Diesel is dead, right?
Well, not according to Mazda. This is the new CX-80 and it has a massive 3.3 litre six-cylinder diesel engine.
So has Mazda gone mad, or does this CX-80 show that diesel can still make sense? And is it actually better than this petrol hybrid Santa Fe?
In this review, we're taking these 7-seat SUVs from Sevenoaks
to the Severn Bridge and back to find out.
And keep watching until the end because we've got all of the numbers here to tell you if a diesel car can really beat a petrol.
Hello, Will.
Hello, Doug.
So, between 2016 and 2019, 38% of all cars sold in the UK had a diesel engine. But do you know what that figure was last year?
Was it 0.2%?
It was, in fact, just 6.3% of all new cars sold in the UK in 2024 had a diesel engine. And so the trend is pretty obvious, isn't it? We know that diesel sales have been going down for quite some time now, which means that Mazda coming out of nowhere and releasing this new massive diesel engine is a bit like someone releasing a mini disc player, isn't it?
Well, yes, given that sales trend, it does seem a bit bizarre, doesn't it? Almost as if Mazda still thinks it's 2005. But remember, diesel was so popular for so long for very legitimate reasons. So, diesel engines generally tend to be more economical than equivalent petrols, and they also produce more torque, which is really great, especially in a big SUV like this. And although this is a diesel, it isn't that old school because although it isn't a full hybrid like your car, it does at least have some mild hybrid tech.
So, a very good test for that CX-80 is this Santa Fe, because we think objectively right now this is the best new 7-seater that you can buy. And it's brilliant not just because it's massive and practical, but it's also comfortable, pretty nice inside, and relative to other 7-seaters out there, pretty good value as well. And it comes with an excellent petrol hybrid setup. And so we know that this is quiet, it's relaxing to drive, particularly around town. And we do know that it's also capable of very good fuel economy, particularly for a big, heavy SUV like this. And so, can that CX-80 really take on this Santa Fe?
Well, to find that out, we are going to compare these cars in every area, including a deep dive into the real-world running costs between this diesel and your hybrid petrol. So, we are going to take these 7-seaters from our offices in Twickenham to Sevenoaks, and then onto the Severn Bridge. We know Severn is spelt differently, but it was the best we could come up with. And then tomorrow we are heading back to our office in Twickenham, a round trip of around about 300 miles, and there we will crunch all of the numbers. But first, I need a coffee.
Now, Will, we've already driven a CX-80, right?
We have. We've driven a plug-in hybrid version of this car previously.
And it really wasn't very good, was it?
It wasn't at all. It was quite disappointing. But I'm happy to report that this diesel version is much, much better. It's almost a completely different car.
Okay.
And most SUVs in this price point at least, if they're available with a diesel engine at all these days, it will probably be a 2-litre 4-cylinder.
Sure.
This has a 3.3 litre 6-cylinder engine, so it's really smooth, it's powerful, and so far I'm getting some pretty impressive fuel economy figures, at least according to the trip computer in that.
Okay, well, don't forget this is a regular full hybrid.
Full hybrid.
Fancy new tech, might be a new diesel engine, but that's old tech compared to this. So I wonder how close these two cars will be when it comes to fuel economy.
Let's find out.
So we've made it to our first stop. We've taken these 7-seaters to Sevenoaks, and let's run through a few more details about these cars here. So this Santa Fe, we obviously know a lot about it already. You can have it as a plug-in hybrid, you can have it as a regular hybrid, which is the setup that we've got here, and this gets a 1.6 litre 4-cylinder petrol engine. You can have it with 2-wheel drive or this 4-wheel drive setup. There are 3 trim levels you can choose from. This is an entry-level premium model, and the cost for all of this is just under £50,000. And the official fuel economy figure for this full hybrid system is 38.6 miles per gallon. So tell us more about the CX-80.
Well, this is effectively a stretched 7-seat version of the CX-60, which has been around for a while now. And as I mentioned earlier, you can have a plug-in hybrid version of this, or you can have this mild hybrid diesel.
And how is it a mild hybrid?
Well, it has a 48-volt electrical system with a 17 brake horsepower electric motor. And part of the reason it has that motor is to give it a little bit of extra performance at low revs and also make the stop-start system smoother. But the main reason is, of course, to improve fuel economy. So this 3.3 litre 6-cylinder diesel can officially do 49.6 mpg. So that's way better than your little 1.6 litre hybrid there.
That is better, isn't it? But of course, we'll have to see what they actually do in this real world test that we have here.
We will. There are 5 trim levels to choose from on the CX-80. Like your car, this is in entry-level trim, which is called Exclusive Line. You get 4-wheel drive as standard, and this particular car costs just over £52,000.
Okay, so let's look inside and see what you get for your money. So this interior is not among the most amazingly luxurious out there. The materials are not of the finest quality, of course, but in a fairly understated way, this is a really, really solid 7-seat SUV interior from Hyundai here. So the materials that you do have, again, remembering this is the cheapest version of this car in a car that is actually pretty good value compared to lots of other 7-seaters out there. This is all very impressive.
Yeah, Hyundai not known for its amazing interiors, I think it's fair to say, and this is not a BMW X7, of course, but it feels solid enough. It's got some nice squidgy materials in the important places, so I'd say, yeah, it's absolutely fine.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't really point to any huge weaknesses in here, and that's in terms of the build quality and the materials, and also the tech that you get as well. Okay, there is a little bit of wobble on these dials, but at least you've got these dials. It's great that you have got these physical controls to very simply adjust the temperature in here rather than being buried on a touchscreen. And yes, okay, this isn't ideal because this is obviously touch sensitive controls for lots of the key bits of the air conditioning, but they're always visible. They're reasonably easy to hit while you're driving, although of course it would be better if they were just physical separate buttons as well.
Yeah, quite easy to reach, aren't they? But what is the infotainment system like?
Pretty good. It's nicely placed. It's not too low so that you have to take your eyes very far from the road to see it.
Curved towards you.
Curved towards you, so it's easy to see, easy to reach from the driving position as well. And it's responsive. The graphics are nice. There are a lot of menus and sub-menus really, but crucially, you get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard, so you can just use that and bypass all the native software as well. And this digital driver display is nice. The graphics look good. It is, though, yet another example of a digital driver display that, for me in my driving position, is blocked a bit by the steering wheel here. But it's not completely blocked, so it's not perfect, but it's also not the end of the world. And generally, really in here, this is just very solid and very practical as well, with all these huge storage compartments dotted around the place. So generally, in here, I can't really point to any weaknesses.
Yeah, you do feel high up. You feel like you're in quite a big SUV. It's a wide car, isn't it?
Wide car, tall as well, brilliant driving position. You can see right down to the nose, so it's no difficulty at all judging the dimensions of the car when you're behind the wheel. So all in all, just really, really solid.
Well, I want to show you my CX-80 because I think you'll be pretty impressed.
Let's see how it compares.
Okay, in the CX-80, and this might not be the most visually amazing interior that we've ever sat in. It isn't going to really blow you away, but it reminds me actually of Audis from about 8 years ago. Very conservatively designed, but extremely well made.
Yeah, there are maybe a few more styling flourishes in the Santa Fe, but this just looks really classy, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, and it really does feel it. Everything you touch, all soft touch, and I'm not talking about a very thin veneer of fabric. This has real substance to it. It feels like an expensive car, and yes, I suppose it is. It's more than £50,000, but it really does feel like an expensive car when you sit inside it.
Yes, I agree, absolutely.
And you've also, like in your car, got some physical aircon controls. Now, there is no dial to adjust the temperature. I would slightly prefer that, but very easy.
These are pretty much just as easy, aren't they?
They are, and also you have some proper physical buttons for the lesser used functions. On your car, of course, you get some icons.
Sure.
So it's a little bit better in that respect. There is one other thing on the usability front that this car is better at, and that is the infotainment system, because this screen perhaps isn't the biggest. It's 12.3 inches, but it's nice and high up on the dashboard, very easy to see. And although I can use it as a touchscreen if I want to, when I'm parked up, that's actually quite easy to do. When I'm driving, it's far less distracting to use this rotary controller down here. Now, BMW, Audi used to have these in all of their cars, and they just make it a lot less distracting to scroll through the menus here. You press down, you make a selection, you only have to take your eyes off the road for a fraction of a second. And it's great that Mazda still includes this setup in its cars.
Absolutely. Let's hope they don't get rid of it in their new models as well. Now, what about the driver display and the general driving position here?
Driving position is very good in many respects. So as you mentioned, that driver display, it isn't as configurable as the screen in your car, but I find it really easy to see, and it puts the important information that I need to see right in front of my eyes. I also get a head-up display, as standard, even in this entry-level exclusive line version. But what I don't get is electric seats. Now, I'm not complaining that I have to slide the seat back and forward myself or adjust the angle of the backrest, but it means I don't get adjustable lumbar support. Right. And the support in the lower back area is pretty poor, to be honest.
Okay.
So that is a problem, particularly when you're doing long journeys like we are today.
Sure. Any other areas of weakness in here?
Well, I think the other area that this doesn't quite match up to the Santa Fe is storage.
Okay.
Because, as you can see, this centre console is one big chunky mass. On your car, you've got a two-level arrangement, and so you can store some stuff underneath the floating centre console.
Up here, you've only got these cup holders, really, and that's it.
You do, and also, look under here. That
Is that it?
is all the storage you get.
So
You've
you
got this
can't-
massive assembly here, but there's barely any storage.
And you can't lift this up and... No,
No, that is it.
that's pretty bad.
So I think on the storage front, and also perhaps on the driving position side of things, certainly these seats aren't as supportive as the ones in the Santa Fe, then your car has the edge. But in every other respect, usability, interior quality, then this is pretty tough to beat.
That does seem fair. Should we get back on the road?
Let's do it.
So Will, we're just under 120 miles into this journey. What sort of fuel economy is your trip computer saying that you're getting?
Well, earlier on, I was seeing about 58 mpg. That has dropped slightly, but still, according to the trip computer, I'm doing about 50 mpg, which is actually above the official figure. How about you?
Wow, that is good. And it does beat me in this hybrid. So I am getting 43.1 miles per gallon so far, which is still pretty good, I'd say, for a petrol heavy big SUV like this. And it also beats the official figure of 38.6 miles per gallon.
It does. We've got to point out that is the trip computer. We will work out later on how accurate those computers are. Another thing I want to point out though is when I started the day today, my car was telling me I had a range of 590 miles. I've done 120 miles now, and it is telling me that I have a range of 620 miles, so it's actually gone up.
Even though you've done more than 100 miles, you've got more range in the tank now.
Exactly. Because of how efficient my driving is, the car has worked out this person behind the wheel is capable of 1,000 miles or more on a tank of fuel, and it does seem that it's going up. So probably by the end of this journey, I'll have 800 miles left or something.
Well, sure. And have you been enjoying the miles so far?
Do you know what? I have driven a diesel CX-80 before, but it was a higher trim level and it was on bigger wheels, so the ride wasn't quite as plush. This at high speeds is actually really smooth. That engine is strong. There's not much road noise really at all, apart from certain sections of the M25, which are terrible. But yeah, so far, I am really enjoying this. The only slight complaint I have is I need a rolled up towel or something, because lower back support really isn't very good at all, as I mentioned earlier. But how is the Santa Fe?
Well, similar really. I've got absolutely no complaints in this. It's really quiet. The ride is nice and cushioned. It feels pretty luxurious on the road, to be honest.
Yeah, when I see you in my rear view mirror, I keep thinking it's a Land Rover Discovery 4, and then you pull a bit closer and I realise that it's the Santa Fe. But when you're in front of me, I think it's the SsangYong Rodius, so that's not quite as visually appealing to me.
Well, the benefit of driving this car is I don't have to look at the back of it. But anyway, we should press on, see you at the Severn Bridge. So we've made it to the Severn Bridge in our 7-seaters, and now let's take a closer look at these boots here. So we'll start with the Santa Fe in 7-seat mode. And you can see, with as many passengers as this car will hold, you still have room for 4 carry-on size suitcases in the boot back here.
That isn't bad. Very nice broad opening here as well.
A lot of room up here if you wanted to stack it even higher. But I am having to hold this parcel shelf.
I did wonder what you were doing
because
with
it might look like there's a perfect spot for it under the boot floor here, but unfortunately there's a massive box which I think has a speaker in on UK spec cars. In some versions of the Santa Fe and other parts of Europe, that bit isn't there, so you can store the parcel shelf perfectly in that bit. Unfortunately in the UK, you can't.
Okay, so more bass, less practical.
Absolutely, but let's see what this is like in 5-seat mode. With the parcel shelf in place, I can fit 9 carry-on size suitcases in the back here, and 9 pretty comfortably. Still got some clearance before the parcel shelf, and also if you didn't have the parcel shelf in and you wanted to stack it right to the roof, you've got loads of room for that. So clearly, incredibly practical.
Can you close the boot?
Of course, look at this. Electrically powered tailgate is standard, and it will close without any fuss.
Okay, fair enough.
What about the CX-80?
Let's have a look. Okay, so CX-80, 7-seat mode, only 3 cases.
Okay.
So that's slightly worse than the Santa Fe, obviously, but there are a couple of things I should point out. Firstly, this boot floor is actually slightly longer, so there's a fair bit of space at the back here. It's just not quite enough for an extra carry-on suitcase. And the reason for that is obviously if you look at the back of your car, it's just a square box. This has a tapered coupe-esque.
You've got a lot less room
line
up here in the Mazda.
You do, and also the other thing to point out is that your third row seat backs, you can adjust the angle of them, can't you? So you can put yours slightly more upright. These are more reclined, and that's the only setting.
They're in one fixed position.
They are. So I think both of those things contribute to the fact that this can only fit 3 cases in the boot in 7-seat mode.
And you're not holding a parcel shelf.
I'm not, and that is because if you take these cases out, under the boot floor here, there is a perfect spot for the parcel shelf, as you can see there.
There is.
And also, when I take it out, it's very easy to do that. You might think that's very narrow to fit across this wide car, but if I press these little buttons in here, I can make it wider very easily.
Very nifty. And look, you've got an extra kind of well for your underfloor storage as well.
I do, I could put an extra soft bag there.
Yeah.
So all in all, I think it's not far behind, is it?
It's not as good, but it's not terrible either. What about 5 seats? So 9 in the Santa Fe, in the CX-80?
Well, only 7.
7, okay.
But I don't think that's a completely fair representation of the difference in the sizes of these cars' boots, because as you can see, this load cover is really low down, and I can only fit 3 cases at the back of the boot there.
You do have quite a lot of space above them though, don't you?
You do, and I think if you were loading something else other than carry-on suitcases, soft bags, it would be closer. But overall, it's down on the Santa Fe.
All right, so in the boot battle, it's the Santa Fe that's the winner. Tomorrow, we'll take a closer look at what it's like for rear seat passenger space, what the third row is like, and what they're like to drive. The next morning, we started the journey back to London, stopping off on the way to take a closer look at the rear seats.
Okay, so we are at the Seven Springs. A good opportunity to talk about these cars' 7-seat practicality.
So, you look pretty comfortable back there.
I'm very comfortable in the second row. Now this seat in front is set up for my driving position. I'm just over 6 feet tall and I have lots of knee room and lots of headroom. Very boxy shape, the Santa Fe. So plenty of headroom there.
And if you were sat in the middle seat?
Still fine. A little bit humped, a little bit raised, but plenty of headroom still. And because there is barely any hump on the floor there, I don't have to straddle a big tunnel.
And you've got 2 cup holders.
2 cup holders, quite a small door bin down there, but look at this. Storage aplenty.
Wow.
Tray that slides out of the centre console there.
Neat.
And I can access the under armrest storage. You can do that from the front, of course, but also from the rear because it's hinged at both ends.
Great.
So all in all, really good. The only thing I would say is that because the floor is quite high, I don't have a huge amount of support under my thighs, so my knees are forced up towards my chest a bit.
So, pretty hard to fault back here, right?
Pretty hard to fault, and finally, if I don't want to speak to you anymore, I can just raise this rear blind, which comes as standard.
Look at that. Well, let's check out the CX-80.
You get rear blinds on the CX-80 as well, although they're a little bit more fiddly to operate. And as I'm sitting here, this seat in front is set up for my driving position again, and I have a very similar amount of legroom, I'd say. Actually slightly better foot space, but slightly worse headroom. I'm still fine, but yeah, head definitely a lot closer to the ceiling.
And what about the middle seat?
If I was sitting there, then my head would actually be touching the ceiling. I was doing that a minute ago, and I've also got this huge tunnel here on the floor that I have to splay my legs either side of. So definitely for a middle passenger, the Santa Fe is the better choice.
And you've got some climate controls back there for the middle row?
I do. I have a separate air conditioning zone back here, so that's very nice, but I don't have any special storage in the centre console. In fact, the door bins down here are pretty small, so I've got that and a couple of pockets on the seat backs.
Right, okay. So ultimately, the Santa Fe is more spacious and more comfortable in the middle row?
I would say certainly for headroom. The seating position actually in this car is maybe slightly more natural. My knees aren't so high up, and also, just like in the Santa Fe, I can adjust the angle of the backrest there, and I can slide these seats back and forth. But overall, I'd say the Santa Fe does just have the edge.
Okay, and it's also worth pointing out you can have both cars with a 6-seat layout.
You can, although not on entry-level trim on the CX-80. I think you can in the Santa Fe.
Yes, you can, but you do have to spend more to have less seats. But what we should do now is take a look at the third row in both cars. Okay, so we're on the move in the third row of the Santa Fe, and really, this is pretty great, isn't it?
For headroom, it's amazing actually. I'm sitting bolt upright, my head is not touching the roof lining there. My knees are wedged against the seat in front, but it's worth pointing out that the driver's seat is set up for my driving position still. We have slid this middle row forward a bit, but I can still fit there absolutely fine.
Sure, and we also sat pretty upright here.
We are.
We can adjust the angle of the third row backrest.
So they are currently
Like so.
in the position that they were when you were doing the boot test yesterday.
Yep.
But yeah, if you recline the seat backs, that is even better. I'd be comfortable for an hour or so back here. I've got a couple of cup holders here, good view out the side thanks to my own little window.
Lots of glass. Really very impressive for the third row.
Not quite as good as a Land Rover Discovery or a BMW X7.
Sure.
But other than that, I think this is as good as it gets.
Absolutely. Right, on the move in the third row of the CX-80. So what's it like back here?
Well, I've actually got slightly more knee room. Again, driver's seat is set up for me, and this middle seat is slid forward to the point that I have enough knee room, but no more than that. The only problem is the seating position is far less comfortable because the floor is higher, so my knees are up round my chin, and foot space is pretty terrible as well.
It is, isn't it? And headroom is pretty significantly worse than the Santa Fe.
It is, especially when you hit a bump and whack your head on the side there.
Look, you can't sit up straight, can you?
You can't. It's not terrible, but it's not particularly brilliant, and you can't adjust the angle of these seat backs either.
No, no. You do get 2 cup holders back here.
2 cup holders, some glass,
Yeah.
but not as much as in the Santa Fe, so it feels a bit more claustrophobic back here. It's also worth pointing out that you don't get ISOFIX on the third row of the CX-80 you do on that Santa Fe, so that is really useful for parents with young kids.
Sure. So ultimately, short journeys with 7 people in the car will be fine in the CX-80, but you'll be more comfortable in the Santa Fe.
I would rather be sitting in that Santa Fe, without doubt, on a long journey. Right, we've done loads of miles in these cars now, and we've driven each other's cars as well. And it's pretty clear that once you're up and moving and you put your foot down hard, this Mazda is quite a bit quicker. Has a really strong, smooth engine, as I mentioned yesterday, and ultimately it will get you up to 60 or 70 miles an hour quicker than that Santa Fe. There is a slight problem though. So when you press the accelerator pedal, there is often quite a long delay between the car starting to surge forwards because of this gearbox, and that can be quite frustrating when you're pulling out of a junction or onto a roundabout. Also, I was complimenting the ride yesterday and saying this was smoother on the motorway than other CX-80s that I'd driven previously on bigger wheels, but on rural roads like the one we're on here, and particularly around town, you do notice there's a firmness that isn't ideal for what's a big family SUV really. The Santa Fe just feels a little bit more plush, deals with bigger bumps in a more sophisticated and smoother way. And although road noise isn't terrible, when you get on a grainy surface, again, like this road we're driving down here, you do notice quite a bit of it, certainly more than there is in that Santa Fe. Now, handling. This does have quite heavy steering. Some people will like that, some people won't. But what's not up for debate is that the steering is quite accurate. So you can place this car very easily on the road, and even when you're cornering quite quickly, it feels confidence inspiring, it grips well, and there isn't too much body lean. This is a really big 7-seater after all. It's also pretty impressive that this car can tow 2.5 tons.
Now the Santa Fe can only tow 1,100 kilograms. So if you're looking for a tow car and you're choosing between these two, clearly there's no competition. You should definitely go for the CX-80. This is also more than a second slower from 0 to 62 miles an hour. But in key areas on the road, this is actually the stronger of the two cars here. So let's take performance, for example. Yes, this will lose a drag race against the CX-80, but off the line, this actually feels way more alert and responsive, because when you press the accelerator, something actually happens in the way you'd hope it would, whereas in the CX-80, it's far more hesitant to actually move off from a stop. And that's thanks to the hybrid setup that this car has, and it's generally very, very impressive. Now, some hybrids can feel really weedy and noisy, but in the Santa Fe, yes, it does make some noise if you accelerate very hard, but once you're up at cruising speeds, it fades into the background and it's very, very quiet in here. So overall, this is the quieter of the two cars. There's less road noise in this car. It's not just the engine noise, which is quieter. This is also the more comfortable of the two. It's slightly softer, there's a bit more float to the ride, but it's all still very controlled, and it generally just feels more relaxing than the CX-80, particularly because the impacts on the suspension in this Santa Fe aren't as abrupt and harsh as they are in the other car. When it comes to the steering, this is certainly lighter than the CX-80, and it actually feels a little more alert in the few degrees around centre, but ultimately if you carry a lot of pace into a roundabout, then you'll notice more body lean in the Santa Fe than you will in the CX-80. But still, in key areas on the road, particularly with things like ride comfort and refinement, it's the Santa Fe which is definitely the stronger of the two cars here. But is it more economical, and is it better value? So let's start with fuel economy, and we both covered 377 miles in the end of this trip, and it was a mix of roads but mostly on the motorway. And in the Petrol Santa Fe, I needed 43.21 litres of fuel, which meant I averaged 39.6 miles per gallon on this test. But my trip computer was a bit on the optimistic side, showing me 41.6 miles per gallon. What about the CX-80?
Okay, so your Santa Fe actually beat its official fuel economy
It did,
figure
very
on
impressive.
that trip. That is very impressive. The CX-80 needed 36.16 litres of diesel for the trip, which meant I averaged 47.6 mpg. And the trip computer was showing me 48 mpg, so that was very accurate. So, okay, it didn't beat its official figure, but it was still way more economical than that Santa Fe.
Yes, absolutely. The CX-80 used its fuel in a more efficient way, but diesel is more expensive at the pumps, isn't it? So let's talk about the finances. And in the Santa Fe, I spent £63.04 on the day, which is based on a litre of petrol costing £1.46 at the fuel station that we both stopped at the end. How much did it cost you in the CX-80?
Well, yes, diesel is more expensive in the UK, at the moment at least. And on the day, I paid just under £1.52 per litre. But because the CX-80 was way more efficient, it was still the cheaper car overall. So I spent a total of £54.93 filling up again at the end of the trip.
Okay, so it is pretty clear that the CX-80 is far more frugal, at least on longer trips like this, and by more than enough to offset the higher cost of diesel at the pumps.
Yes, that is true. And given the size of the fuel tanks in both cars, the impressive fuel economy translates to a real-world range of 774 miles in that CX-80, compared with 583 miles in the Santa Fe. So really, you can be driving all day long and not have to worry about filling up.
That's pretty good. You're unlikely to get range anxiety in either of those cars,
Probably
are you?
not.
So diesel beats petrol?
Well, the CX-80 proves that modern diesel engines can combine impressive real-world fuel economy with strong performance, and you don't really need to worry about being banned from any clean air zones anytime soon, because all new diesel cars have to meet tough Euro 6 emission standards.
But if we talk about the environmental side of things, just because an engine meets a particular emission standard doesn't mean there's nothing harmful being pumped out of the exhaust pipe, does it?
No, that's a very good point. The reality is that any car that runs on petrol or diesel, whether or not it's a hybrid, produces toxic fumes. The only question is how much, and it's hard to pick a winner there, because if you look at the official data, the CX-80 emits around 5 times as much fine particulate matter and a third more NOx, but also fewer unburnt hydrocarbons and less CO2 as well.
Okay, now fuel costs and emissions are only part of the story here though, aren't they? You'll also want to consider how much each car is going to cost to own in the long run. And despite the thirstier engine that it has, it's the Santa Fe that actually works out the cheaper of the two cars here. And that's because it costs less to buy in the first place, and we do know that diesels typically cost more than an equivalent petrol. And the Santa Fe is actually predicted to be worth more if you sell it after 3 years with 36,000 miles on the clock than the CX-80.
It is also the cheaper choice if you're signing up to a PCP finance agreement, as many buyers will choose to do. So if you put down a £5,000 deposit, you will pay £654 a month over the next 4 years to drive the Santa Fe, assuming an annual mileage limit of 10,000 miles. Whereas on the same terms, the CX-80 will cost you an extra £21 a month.
Okay, so diesel does have some advantages over the petrol in this test, but looking at the bigger picture, the Santa Fe is the winner, really, and it doesn't have much to do with what's under the bonnet, because the Santa Fe is better at carrying 7 people. It's got a bigger boot, and in the ways that matter most to SUV buyers, particularly in terms of comfort, it's the better car to drive as well. And it'll work out cheaper in the long run, whether you're buying in cash or on a PCP finance deal. The CX-80 does offer better fuel economy, but overall, it's the Santa Fe that's the winner here, isn't it?
Yeah, the Santa Fe is a brilliant car, and I think it's worth pointing out that it doesn't just beat the CX-80, it's the best 7-seater that you can buy at the moment, particularly when you factor in money.
Okay, there you go. Thanks very much for watching this video. If you want to see another one, click up there. Make sure you subscribe to our channel as well. And for much more information on these cars and every other car around, click on that link to go to whatcar.com.